before we kind of go into what we'd like to see and the more kind of action focused aspect of this, we thought it was important to sort of explain the context, why this is so important for young people and the climate, the environment that young people find themselves in the country at the moment. Just sort of getting that across and then contextualizing the youth mobility deal or lack thereof. So yeah, as you can see, we've called this, brilliant. So much better. So we've called this this presentation, it's to the trap generation. So obviously free movement of people and for young people as well is no longer an option. And then youth mobility and crisis, and we'll talk you through kind of the crisis aspect of this. Here are just a few kind of examples of where we've got issues and the kind of opinions of young people wanting their freedom back, etc., etc. I think we can have. Is there? Oh, you've got it. Perfect. Yeah. Sorry, this is all quite new. Okay. Is that? Yeah. So yeah, this is quite a dramatic heading on this slide, but I think it's true. Things are really bad for young people right now in the UK. When we're talking about youth mobility and young people, we're kind of talking about 18 to 30-year-olds, by the way. So just a few sort of examples. Obviously, Brexit, lost opportunities, everything that came with that, not just the end of free movement. So that's sort of where this starts. But then we've got the cost of living crisis, the rental crisis, lots of young people finding it almost impossible to move out from their parents, living in their parents' in their late 20s. This kind of, we're seeing a lot of generational regression. So in the past, you'd see young people getting richer and wealthier than their parents and sort of succeeding and kind of climbing up the sort of housing ladder or the job ladder or the earnings ladder. And we're seeing for the first time in a long time a regression. So young people doing worse than their parents and previous generations. On top of that, you've got the student debt issue. Kind of £50,000 on average is what a young person will be coming out of university with now, and then astronomical interest rates on top of that, which are crippling. And as someone who didn't have to face that, who got the privilege of the old system, I can't imagine what it's like to live with £50,000 of debt when you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old just coming out of university. So all of this is kind of happening for young people, and it's really worth bearing this in mind when we talk about youth mobility. Yeah, so employment crisis. This is something that hasn't been heavily covered by the media, but if you speak to young people and if you kind of read social media and Reddit forums, increasingly we're seeing that degrees have been devalued, and that young people are graduating with good degrees and are not able to find employment. A lot of them are finding employment after a year but are massively underemployed. So that means that they're often ending up in a profession they didn't actually need a degree for. So coming out with that much student debt into the current cost of living crisis, rental crisis, and then finding that their degrees don't have the value that they were perhaps promised when they were growing up, when they were working hard and studying. So we're seeing more and more of this, and I think this is probably something that's going to come out increasingly. The government and the previous government, some ministers have sort of weaponized this a bit and kind of perhaps implied that young people don't want to work, or that it's mental health problems that are leading to people sick note culture or not wanting employment. But generally, if you talk to young people, they don't want to be sat at home. They want to be out in the world, working, earning, contributing. And yeah, so that's that. This is quite a stark and unpleasant statistic, but the leading cause of death in this country for anyone under the age of 35 is suicide. So it's just here to kind of, when we're talking about young people, and there's often this sort of polarized language, young people are lazy or young people are X, Y, Z. I think it's really important to keep this in mind, that it's a statistic, it's not a fabrication. There's clearly something is not right, and young people don't feel healthy and safe if this is the case. As we know, the NHS is really struggling to provide treatment for mental health funding. It's not a priority. So just as a side note, the Labour government announced 22 billion was going to the NHS in the last budget, and only 0.1% was earmarked for mental health funding. So it's just a kind of another example of this sort of crisis that we talk about. How can we justify calling it a crisis for young people? This is like, yeah, thanks to successive governments, and it's not blaming any party more than the other, but it's just a fact that this is the reality for young people in this country. So as I've mentioned, the student debt, the loss of free movement, this has cut opportunities, not just employment opportunities, but where they're going to live, who they're meeting, cultural opportunities, the kind of conversations that they're having. A lot of that's been restricted and dialed back. Like I mentioned, mental health and well-being, we had COVID-19 restrictions. So a lot of young people in that Generation Z bracket, they lost years where they couldn't study or they couldn't meet people, and we're seeing a lot increasing levels of anxiety and mental health problems as a result. So degrees have lost value. So yeah, one job for every 200 applications. And even though it's quite hard to sort of convey what that feels like, that statistic, but as someone who has done these hundreds of applications and just heard nothing back, it's really soul destroying. Housing crisis, cost of living crisis, all mentioned. Poverty levels are increasing, so as are homelessness levels, and we're also seeing increases in violence against women and girls. So yes, this is all quite bleak, and sorry about that, but yeah, this is the reality. But basically, a lot of young people feel that the ones that are kind of engaged and understand the implication of Brexit feel that it's severed sort of these educational, cultural and professional opportunities. And that's furthered this climate of hopelessness and feeling. Also, I think for young people in the UK, they feel quite sort of abandoned, maybe abandoned is not the right word, but cut off and separated from their European counterparts. Whereas the rest of Europe has this exchange and this movement, and it's just the UK, you know. And in the climate, everything that I've mentioned, there's definitely a feeling of a lack of hope and a lack of opportunity. This is just kind of a slide because I was sort of interested in how this plays into the right-left divide that we're seeing play out a lot at the moment, the radical right. So basically, federalism, so that's the EU. So that kind of equates to more mobility, more opportunities, working as a cohesive group. And then nationalism is closed borders, and that results in fewer chances for young people. So before Brexit, the UK youth could study anywhere in the EU, work without visa restrictions, and explore different cultures freely. And now they obviously face visa barriers, massive costs to study and work abroad, and fewer international job prospects. And we've seen that those international job prospects for young people in the UK just shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. Mobility, you know, in a climate where the country isn't, the social contract is being broken for young people. They're not able to go to university, work hard, get a job, and then find security, whether that's financial or in terms of housing or job security, etc. That social contract has been broken in the UK. But not only that, the mobility and the freedom and the opportunity to leave and find other places where that social contract was being upheld, that's been lost for young people as well. So yeah, I think I just thought this was interesting how the youth, because youth mobility is coming up a lot in the news and the media, and it's quite interesting how it's kind of being weaponized by the right, especially, but certainly by lots of different political parties. So the far right, they support tighter borders and they see mobility as a threat. Centralists, conservatives, and the left push for open exchange and international collaboration. The far right, kind of, they thrive on this fear and isolation rhetoric. So, you know, preserve our jobs for our people, preserve our houses for our people, etc. Whereas progressive politics invest in young people's futures through mobility and opportunity. So yeah, just to kind of focus it back on what young people are missing out on, but without free movement of people, without youth mobility. So jobs, access to European job markets, higher wages, more experience, education. We saw Erasmus Plus being pulled, and other studying abroad opportunities. This kind of resulted before in global learning, new skills, language enhancement. Young people were engaged a lot more in learning European languages before we left the EU for very obvious reasons, and also art and cultural opportunities. So international exchange, you know, we've always seen this with poetry, with film. International exchange, it fosters creativity. It's the meeting of ideas. It's thinking in a new way. It's communicating, talking to people about things that you might not have considered because they haven't impacted your local area before. So all of this and the diversity and the collaboration and the inspiration that comes with it, young people feel they're missing out on. Yeah, so these are just some kind of more statements about the benefits, but we've already really touched on them, which are sort of in terms of escaping stagnant environments, growing professionally, meeting diverse people. And I suppose I included this because if we look at that statistic about the leading cause of death, the young people in this country, is suicide. Well, the benefits of youth mobility, of for a young person, just knowing there's another option, there's a route, there's a different solution, and I think it really can't be. And I can't emphasize enough how much that would mean for a lot of young people who feel they've lost all opportunity and hope. So yeah, just I think this is my final slide. So just wanted to say that youth mobility is more crucial than ever before. And in the face of all these structural barriers that we've discussed, that young people face, especially, access to mobility is empowering. It provides opportunities both for employment and education. And it offers this wonderful feeling of hopefulness, and a feeling of kind of broadening horizons and change that many young people really need. So I'll leave it on that and hand it over to Madalena.
Thank you, Dorothy. So after you've painted such an astute picture of the desolate reality of the world that young people face, I'm going to try and pick up the positive attitude with some actions that we can take to promote the campaign for youth mobility and try and restore some of those opportunities back to young people to give them some hope for the future. So obviously there's been a lot of talk in the news about youth mobility scheme, which the European Commission has proposed. At European Movement, we're really hopeful that this year, 2025, will be the year that, you know, this is really on the agenda and we can really work and make it a reality for young people. So this is where we'd like to put all of our efforts in terms of campaigning. But of course, youth mobility scheme is nice, but what would actually be better is the real deal, Erasmus. This is the absolute flagship program of the European Union. And we should really be campaigning to rejoin Erasmus, which is obviously why European Movement have taken the Embrace Erasmus campaign and are taking it into 2025 to try and really get it on the government's agenda. Of course, there are lots of countries outside of just the EU that participate in Erasmus Plus. So there's no reason that the UK could not rejoin post-Brexit. So the first thing is European Movement's Erasmus Plus campaign. If you haven't signed the petition already, I'm sure you will have, make sure you do that, but also share it. Share it as widely as you can on social media, by email, or if you can go out with the street stalls, etc., and get members of the public to sign the petition. The more support that we can show through the sign-ups, the more impact that will have, or influence that will have on policymakers. These are just some photos from the Sheffield for Europe group, because I had them on my computer. But really reaching out to the local communities. I think having conversations with people that you can relate to through your local connections is really the best way to reach out and spread the campaign more widely. And then, of course, you can lobby politicians. The MP, James McCleary, did really well getting the bill through Parliament recently. So you can write to your MP and ask them to support when these motions are happening in Parliament. And also, if you are organizing an event in your local area around Erasmus Plus, invite the MPs or local politicians to attend the events. I know I did an event with Cambridge for Europe recently, and Pippa, gosh, I can't remember, Hewlings, yeah, that's it, came along, and she was brilliant. A lot of MPs would love to participate in these events and will help to add some political glamour to to the event. And this is something that I really want to focus on is personal stories. I really think this is the best way to get arguments across. And I know Caroline Lucas, because I attended the Green Party conference, really pushes for this as well. It's the way to make politics more relatable to people, especially people that are a bit apathetic, don't really care, don't want to know, have had enough of the toxicity of politics. If you make it personal, it makes it relatable. And obviously the Erasmus babies story. I actually met someone in Brussels who was involved in breaking this story, and the European Commission tried to block it because they're like, oh no, we can't do this, we can't share this story. But obviously when it got out, it was all over the news, and it was actually really great in terms of promoting the program. And just yesterday I saw Eurodesk publishing a Valentine's Day post with an Erasmus love story, and I was like, so cute. But it's just a way to, you know, they interviewed a young woman about how she met her partner during an Erasmus exchange. It's just a way to make it more relatable to people. So I think if you've had an experience on Erasmus, like sharing that positive experience is a really good way to help people engage with the campaign. But also now that opportunities have been taken away from young people, you can also share those. So my example is that I'm part of an art collective called Dare to Care, who make work about mental health. And we got offered a residency and exhibition in Helsinki, and the other members of the collective were eligible for Creative Europe funding, EU mobility funding, to attend this residency, but because of Brexit, I wasn't. So it's literally, Brexit is stealing opportunities away from young people. So we wanted to finish by taking it to you. If you've got any questions, any contributions, any feedback, do you think that the Young European Movement should be focusing on youth mobility this year? How can you help support us? And how can you help us reach more decision makers and shift public opinions? Yeah,